Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's special edition of Avero Live. My guest today is Mr. Kurt Greene, who we'll introduce shortly. But my name is AV. I'm the founder and CEO at Avero Advisors. We are an independent third-party consulting firm that serves local governments and governments of all kinds modernize their operations through better business process design or selecting the right software products as an independent third party. Um, we go live every week, and this show will turn into podcasts, into blog posts, and several other forms of media that is available to you for free. Please subscribe to our channels and keep the conversation flowing. Let me know where you're calling or joining from in the chat box and send your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can today. But without further ado, Kurt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Tell us a little bit about, well, let me tell the audience a little bit about why you're here, and then you can introduce yourself. You know, we keep talking about change management, project management, transformation, and digital, this and the other. Thanks, Kurt. Um, and there's a huge management and human element to the work that we do. The second reason that Kurt's here is because in the last 2 years, we have experienced tremendous growth as Avero. And what I've realized as a leader is growth is distinct from growing up. There's a lot of things that need to happen as you grow to sustain that so you don't collapse under your own expectations or growth or just the numbers. So that's when my world collided with Kurt's, and hence the topic of discussion, beyond the comfort zone. Kurt, before we get into all of that, tell us about you.
Gosh, real quick, my leadership journey started at West Point and continued as I served in the Army for about 5 years. And ever since then, really, I've just been geeking out about how teams and people get the results they want. So I spent a bunch of years in big business, P&G, GE, Procter and Gamble, or that's P&G, Pfizer. But along the way, at one point, I was invited to join the leadership team of a small manufacturing firm. So I got to see for the first time really what small and mid-sized businesses look like and how they operate, and kind of caught the bug then. So the owner of the company was in Vistage, one of the peer advisory organizations that are out there, and he put the rest of us in key groups. And I just kind of discovered that I was actually in a laboratory where I got to play with stuff that you really don't get to play with in a large company and have a little bit more immediate impact on things. And also learning new tools every month by going to Vistage, and just really kind of caught that entrepreneur, small and mid-sized company bug. Ended up going back into the bigger business corporation type setting for a few more years, but finally punched out and started up my own firm in 2015 and became a Vistage chair as part of my consulting practice, and was also helping my clients get better at strategic planning and sort of generally, let's plan our work and then work our plan. That's one thing I learned from the Army, and realized that there's a real need for that. Learned about EOS at a conference, actually a Vistage conference, and just started using some of the tools in my business and helping some of my clients use the tools in theirs. And when I really got serious about letting go of the pride of ownership of my own content for the strategic planning I was doing, and embrace that here's something that's actually better and simpler than what I was doing, I just, you kind of put your ego aside and go, this is a train I probably want to get on.
Yeah.
And so I became an EOS implementer. And so really, as a chair and as an implementer, I'm lucky that I get to kind of scratch the three itches that I think every entrepreneurial leader needs scratched, which is you need to have a peer group, other folks that you could bounce ideas off of that are going to function as a safe and confidential counsel for you. Vistage is just one of them. There's lots of different peer group organizations out there, but it gets lonely at the top, and folks like you need a place to go let your hair down a little bit and really be confront the things that you're facing, because everyone in that room is in the same seat,
Yeah.
and that's hard to find sometimes, um, in a way that is safe and confidential. The second thing I think they need is some kind of coach. Really, anybody that is going to hold up a mirror and a flashlight and let you know how you're showing up as a leader. And so those two things happen with Vistage. And then EOS is simply, any company needs a sound operating system to run off of, and you can only
Yeah.
have one. And EOS is just one of several things that are out there. Um, but it's just pick something and stick with it. That's how we're going to run our business. And something that's going to grow with you is the important part of that. And EOS EOS provides that for some of the folks that I work with.
Thank you, Kurt. And by the way, I'm part of both of Kurt's organizations. I'm in the Knoxville Vistage group that has helped tremendously. I mean, it's not an ad for Vistage by any means, but it's been very useful to me as a leader. And you're right, it's lonely at the top, not because I don't have people around me, but there are times when you can't discuss openly with the people that you lead, and you need a group, which that group has fulfilled that promise for me over the last year and a half, and made lifelong friends. But also, we've adopted EOS. Like you said, when you get to a certain stage in your growth, and we did, where I'm an entrepreneur, I like to run fast, try new things, but when the organization grows, they need structure. The people need structure. The people need direction. The people need written down visions and values. And everything that was in my head over the last 8 or 9 years had to somehow be distilled into something. So instead of coming up with my own or our own methodology when I discovered EOS, it was all right there.
Yeah.
And it has been transformational for us. So we proudly say that we run on EOS, and Kurt's our implementer. So all of these things are somewhat related, but not. But again, the worlds collide, and transformational change doesn't just happen. You have to be deliberate about that. So talk to me a little bit about how change happens according to you, and how much of it is serendipity versus deliberate action, um, especially when you haven't been there before. How does one navigate these things?
Yeah. So it's kind of, I think that's one of the great paradoxes of, uh, you know, being in business, is that the human brain is naturally wired to not want to change, because it wants to routinize and develop automatic responses for things so that it can stay dialed in to the things that are going to be threatening. We're going back to the reptilian brain with your fight or flight response mechanisms. And so the short version is humans are wired to want to remain in the status quo. And the paradox is that one of my favorite, probably my favorite definition of leadership is from Kuzner and Kouzes and Posner, which is that leadership is the art of inspiring people to want to struggle for something different, some version of that. And so that's what leading is all about, is sort of mobilizing the desire to change when the human brain naturally wants to resist change. And so that is the age-old paradox that all leaders face. And so when you think about, for example, your journey in organizational growth, it is inevitable. Every organization, every department, sometimes even every individual goes through cycles of hitting ceilings. Children don't grow in a straight linear line. Children grow in spurts when they're coming up. And in nature, everything in nature happens in spurts, not in nice, tidy, perfectly sloped, right? And so change. So hitting ceilings are inevitable, and when you're going up a growth curve, you are evolving, but you're going to hit you're going to hit a ceiling, and instead of being part of evolution, it gets messy, and it becomes more of a revolution. And that's where the messy part of change happens. And so, in order to navigate through those ceilings, teams just have to understand that that's real and that it's natural and inevitable, and just get comfortable with some messiness.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, we're not here to educate everyone on EOS. EOS just happens to be one system that allows you to learn gives you the tools and the ways of thinking to be able to navigate through the messy parts. That's really what I'd say EOS is about. And any other system, quite honestly.
Right. And I think as a fast growing organization, we can never promise stability at this point, right? Things change.
Yeah.
And that's the messy part. It's not that it's broken. We're trying to build something. And I think any system will help you convey that message effectively, because otherwise it looks chaotic. And it used to be, right?
Yeah.
When, again, you start hitting that hockey stick up, and you bring more people in that have had other experiences where things are stable, written down, documented, and then the chaos of a fast-growing company seems like things are breaking and falling apart while it actually is the scaffoldings going up. And that was very helpful for us. So, when you talk about leadership, it's not just business. Like our clients, our audience watching today is mostly government leaders.
Sure.
It's the same thing. When you're at the top, when
leadership.
you're city manager, you are the executive director, the CEO of a large utility. You've got your board and you've got yourself. And it's the same lonely thing. You can't, even worse probably because of the public exposure and rules, that you can disclose things. And
people get to ask questions, hard ones.
In the open.
Yeah.
So
on the record.
So that's our clients, right?
Yeah.
And so we see ourselves as consultants first, but also coaches and therapists at times. Unofficially, right? And we're a bunch of smart people that can solve any problem, not just ERP and IT stuff. We've really solved problems for clients that we had no business talking to them about, if you just look at our website and presence. So consultants can be that outlet for the top executives at cities, counties, government agencies. Not necessarily completely qualified, but when you become a trusted advisor,
that's right.
You become a trusted advisor. And I think the trust comes from saying also that that's not something I can help you with, but let me connect you with someone.
Exactly. That's where I was. Yeah.
And that's the other benefit of having a peer group. And I love that. So let's take some audience questions. They seem to be pretty benign. So let's see. Mick asks, how do you create clarity for your team when everything is changing fast? I think that's a question a lot of our younger, newer workforce has to. Yeah. How do you clarify this?
So broader context, I guess, especially right now, there's just a whole lot for government agencies that are maybe up in the air right now. So creating clarity sometimes also involves just simply creating maybe confidence. And in a lot of ways, it's simply leadership teams, in some cases, being humble enough to say that this is our situation right now. And we don't have all the answers, but here's what we do have, and here's what we do know. And it really boils down to just leaders being a little more transparent with what's going on, and assuring people with some facts about how the company is prepared for those things. So it's really, in times of uncertainty, short of being able to take whatever actions that we feel like we have to do something, having a plan is more than half the battle. And then communicating that plan is like, look, these are sort of unsettled times right now, but we're here to assure you that here's what we have going on in our business. Here's what our pipeline looks like. Here's what our efforts look like. And, treating employees like mushrooms is never healthy, right? Putting them in the dark and feeding them crap is never going to work. So admitting it, right? And I think for many of us, when we get elevated to some position of leadership, we feel like we're supposed to all of a sudden have all the answers.
Yeah.
And in my experience, the strongest leaders are the ones who are not afraid to admit that they don't have all the answers, and they need your help. Here's what I have. What do you have? Let's put it together. And that's better than me having all the answers and you guys just doing what I say. I mean, that's just, that's kind of old school autocratic style of leadership that I just don't think works in 2025.
No. And, where do you go from there? Like, you can sit here and pretend you know what's coming next, what's going to happen with AI or Doge or tariffs. There's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
In addition to the uncertainty of you have never been here before.
Yeah.
This is, wide open territory, running a business that has become larger than you ever thought it would.
Yeah.
When you started it.
There's a vulnerability on the part of leaders that in my experience, personal and as I work and coach with other leaders, that vulnerability is a leadership virtue. And unfortunately, most of us have been brought up as that being that vulnerable in front of your direct reports and the rest of your folks is actually a weakness. And I just really don't believe that. And so back to Mick's question is simply the communicating early and often with your folks is the way to provide clarity. Sometimes clarity is just, okay, we all know everything that they know, and we have a plan and we understand it.
Also, having the right people is critical because not everybody is built to understand that. And clarity means different things to different people. You could have a 100-line SOP printed for a certain thing, and some people will say that's not clear enough. Where we need people that can take the clarity out of the vagueness and make their own clarity.
And fill in,
Fill in, right?
Yeah.
And you say this a lot. You need to fill in the gaps, otherwise other people will.
Yeah.
This is kind of flipped where there is no clarity.
Yeah.
We know we're going to make payroll. We know we've got work booked. We know new business is coming. Beyond that, the definition of clarity is something that's really important because otherwise you can't give clarity.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point tangentially here, that who you let in the door as a leader is one of the biggest, most important decisions you make. And where would we be if we let people check their brains at the door?
Yeah.
Here's some guardrails. We hired you because you match our core values and you're on the train for our mission. You don't need us to guide you handhold you every step of the way. That's why we hired you.
Yeah.
And sometimes we find that we might have mishired someone, and our duty to them and to our own organization is how do we get them on a different bus as soon as possible? That matches them. This may not be the right organization for you. Let's find a different place for you where you can thrive.
Yeah.
We were hoping that you would do this, and it's not a fit for us, and we're not a fit for you, and let's not waste time.
Yeah, and that's been a big outcome of going down this path with EOS for us. Clarity on values. We now live by them. We hire, fire, reward by values, and it's phenomenal. So it's the right people understand the message, and it's clear to them. Because I can't, again, like we were talking about earlier. I'm reading a book called "The Courage to Be Disliked," and in that it said that what someone else perceives of you or thinks of the actions you just took is their task. It's not yours.
Yeah.
So don't interfere with someone else's task. Yeah. Our job is to provide clarity to the right people.
Yeah.
Question from Kyler. Do you think there's a difference between a CEO and a founder? In my experience, founders tend to be creative, entrepreneurial types who often struggle to scale, usually because they lack established processes and standardization.
Sometimes. I've worked with leaders of all stripes, and there are the the visionary type founders who um, had an idea and turn it into a business and make it this great thing.
Hmm.
And then it sort of outgrows them. And they realize they need to bring in somebody that can kind of run the day-to-day better than they can. CEO is just a title, but generally speaking, that founder and CEO duo is definitely out there. Very contrasting personas. Um, and sometimes there's a little bit, I'm working with a client right now where the person who holds the CEO title um, over the last 2 or 3 months has realized that he simply does not have the chops
Hmm.
to actually lead a company, doesn't want the chops. And he wants to go back into the technical role that he has fulfilled in that company for years and years before they had a change in leadership, and pointed to someone else on the team and said, I think you're the one that needs to run this. And so uh, there may have been a little ego involved at first, and felt like I needed to step into this role. And then he decided what was going to be in the greater good of the whole organization. And he'll still hold the CEO title because only customers care about that. Nobody inside the organization really cares about titles. They know who he is and what he does. But it's just an example of somebody owning that, to this person's question, owning the fact that I'm not the right person for that, and I'll get someone else needs to be the one that runs the show, and that's okay. So
That's,
yeah, that see that happen fairly often.
yeah, and as a CEO, I can tell you that's a hard thing to realize.
Yeah. In your case, I mean, you founded this thing,
Hmm.
and it's your baby.
Hmm.
And anyone who's a parent knows how hard it is the first time that you want to go out with just your spouse when you have a new baby at home. That is a hard evening right there,
Yeah,
for most of us.
yeah,
Same thing. And what if someone comes in and calls my baby ugly? And there's a lot of very personal for founders, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. But again, it's been done here. One of the key decisions we made this year, late last year, was um, implementing what's called an integrator position, right? A COO that runs day-to-day operations, is responsible for the quarterly results and rocks, and that has freed me up to do a lot more
Hmm.
forward thinking, looking out
Hmm.
into the future and seeing what we need to do next,
Yeah.
um, without worrying necessarily about what's going on today. But it was super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, right person, right seat.
And you live through it.
I lived
You're on
through
the
it.
other side of
I
it.
am on the other side.
Congrats.
So this next question from Clay ties into that. Clay says, hypothetically, they're asking for a friend. If an employee is the right person in the right seat, but wants to move up, what is the best move for the company?
Like, what should the company do about it? Or
Right. I mean, they want to move up,
yeah.
right? They want to get a different seat
Hmm.
that is higher in, I don't know, position, management,
Hmm.
money.
Yeah.
What's the right move for the company?
Uh, well, I don't know if this is baked into this person's hypothetical scenario.
Hmm.
I would assume that there are some regular cadence of conversations happening between that employee and his or her manager, or boss,
Hmm.
and the company is aware of the fact that here's a person that is right person, right seat, wants to be here, does a great job. And as the company grows, we are, uh, you know, as a management team, we are aware of where our talent is and where they would like to go. And when a seat opens up, as we get bigger, we know who we can tap on the shoulder to move into that role. So,
Yeah.
so the play is um, constantly being on the constantly scouting for where are we going to be in the next 12 months and who can help us get there by moving into more important positions.
Hmm.
Awareness and um, on the flip side, I would say there's probably some patience as well on the side of employees, that you're doing a great job and love the company and the company loves you. And also growing companies sometimes everyone knows obviously that, we still have bills to pay, and we can't afford a whole bunch of overhead all at once to help folks get to where their career aspirations are. But if
Mhm.
you're willing to be a part of a journey with us, then we can certainly, we certainly anticipate that we'll have some needs not too far down the road that can be offered to people.
What let's this next question is kind of pulling us back into our work roles. In the context of a tech implementation,
Mhm.
um, is that level of vulnerability actually helpful, or does it create more friction? I think it was based on a previous comment about leaders being
Yeah,
vulnerable. How does that imply to a tech implementation, massive change, going from like a
yeah.
green screen system to something modern? I,
Mm.
that we like to
Is
say,
this between uh, like uh, the consulting firm and the client vulnerability? Do you
just the
think,
client,
or
they need to be vulnerable, right? A lot of
yeah,
times, our projects start when the client is vulnerable and says something is wrong.
right?
We're not getting the results we should be getting. I don't know if we have the right management in place or the right systems. Consult
Hmm.
comes in, and at that point, the client needs to continue being vulnerable to
Hmm.
us, tell us the exact problems, because
Yeah,
otherwise we can't help.
right.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess my head is going to kind of more of a medical analogy, where, if you don't tell the doctor what's really hurting, um, then then we can't write the right prescription, and we're
Hmm.
going to try to write a prescription for something else that actually could do more harm, than if we just are open and honest and saying uh, what's happening. And I don't know if this is the nature of this question. Also says, what about consultant vulnerability in the other direction? Well,
Yeah.
I think it all, like you said at the top of this show, it all starts with actually having a human connection.
Hmm.
And I would assume in your world, you're it all thrives on having really healthy relationships, and you can't have healthy relationships when you're hiding stuff from each other. It doesn't matter what it is. And if it's a tech implementation where there's two parties, one is helping and the other one has to make it, is being helped. If you don't have that two-way openness and honesty, then it's just not going to be as good a project, in my opinion. I don't know. What's been your experience with that?
It's like mentorship. You can't force it on somebody. You can't necessarily schedule it. Like, when you say mentoring programs, you immediately think, I'm going to pair so and so manager with so and so junior, and then they're going to meet once a month to mentor. Um, there may not be willingness to do on either end or on one end, and then it doesn't work. And that's how it works with consultant client relationship. You
Hmm.
must want me to help you, and I must love helping you.
Yeah.
Um, if you're doing it to check a box and move on, it doesn't usually work out,
Yeah.
right? And it's again the doctor-patient analogy. You need to be this trusted relationship, and it needs to be open.
I was exactly thinking about the word trust,
Hmm.
because you can't have trust without there being some level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and I mean, I know but some folks may have heard of it. Patrick Lencioni, Five
Hmm.
Dysfunctions of a Team. He's got a 5-step pyramid, and the bottom of that pyramid is the foundation of everything about relationships and results, and that is trust, vulnerability based trust. And so, knowing that the other person is going to have your back when you're not in the room, that's my definition of trust. And so, if you don't have that, I don't know what else you have in any relationship, quite honestly.
Yeah. It's always the police. Kidding. All right. Next question comes from Megan. What's your take on this? Is it harder to teach skills or to align values, and why?
This Megan?
She's right there. I know.
um, uh, well, my take is, and I'm open to being swayed somewhere else, but I clearly don't have all the answers. It's easy to teach skills because those are things you can pour into someone.
Mhm.
If you want to get an engineering degree, you can figure that out. If you want to learn how to get better at sales, you can learn that and figure that out. Values, you kind of have them or you don't, or at least can decide to share them
Yeah.
or you don't. And so it's infinitely the the best way to get around feeling like you have to get people to align to your values is to not select people who are not aligned to your values in the first place when you bring them into the organization. So that means we have to flip the script that most of us have been taught, which is the first thing we should be talking about when we're interviewing folks for our companies is, do they align with our values? And of course, that means you have to have some first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of the work still remains, in my experience, is that just a lot of folks feel like it's froofy culture, soft stuff. They're like, well, how do you expect us to run a company on values? Well, there's a lot of research that supports that the ones that take that seriously are the ones that are most successful. So screen for it in the first place, and then you don't have to worry about aligning values. That's my short answer.
Well, and it is fuzzy, right? We've been through all of this. I scoffed at it. Values, yeah, we have values. Grow.
Do your job and
your
bring in
job.
money.
Yeah, I will pay you. And so when values are discussed, it's like, so what? You want a poster in the break room? Was my initial reaction. And then as we went through a few iterations of coming up with our values, right? When we finally landed on them, it was very freeing. All of that work led to clarity on who we are on paper. And now they may change, the words might change, but the freedom that came from distilling and articulating those values was tremendous.
Freedom, interesting.
Yeah, because you now don't have to put words to what I feel. We've already done that work.
Yeah, we've distilled it.
Yeah, because on the fly, I may not necessarily be able to explain, depending on what day and what's going on.
Right.
My definition would change. But now that it's on paper, and how do you live through that, and how we apply things like right people, right seed, the analyzer, people analyzer, it's been freeing because we have the right tools.
Reviewing, and yeah.
So the question again from Megan is, how do you balance hiring to values with pressure to just fill the seat? Where's the line between patience and progress?
Yeah. Very common challenge because done. So better to have
Go for it.
Great. It is way better to have a hole in the org chart than an asshole.
All right. We need that on the wall somewhere. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Kyler's asking, we're data people, techies. How much stake can you put on database screens like personality assessments? Like, how much value do you put on that?
So personality assessments are just one snapshot of someone on a particular day from a particular angle is kind of my analogy that I use. And so they are just one of many tools that should be informing a decision if we're looking at them from a employee selection standpoint. Just because someone doesn't perfectly match a profile of an assessment tool that you think you need, it's like, it just gives you something to talk about more, because just because someone, says that they're an INTJ on a Myers-Briggs, and you feel like you need a different skill set, two INTJs are radically different people with different approaches and different ways of thinking. So it is really dangerous to say, well, they didn't match our profile. I use them. I encourage folks to use them more as one of many tools to inform things. And quite honestly, they are less suitable. It's one way that I feel like sometimes management teams offload the responsibility for of making selection decisions by using an instrument like that to try to streamline the process, when really they just don't feel like they want to take the time to do the hard work to really get to know somebody
Mm-hmm.
and how they match up with their core values. Personality assessments are much better used as development tools once they're at your company,
Mm.
where you can really understand someone's wiring. Um, and it's also a great way to build trust when on teams, when you understand how each other are wired using whatever tool. There are a bunch of great ones out there, and I'm not married to any one of them in particular. Certified in one, but that doesn't matter. Um, in fact, Lencioni says that's a great way to begin building vulnerability based trust, because once you understand how someone is wired, you say, oh, well, you're not really such a jerk. It's just how you view the world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I understand that. And the progressively thinking organizations realize that we use things like personality assessments to first simply um, be able to recognize how we're different, and then next kind of deeper levels to understand how we're different. But the gold standard is, how do we actually leverage those differences?
Right.
We're on the same team, but I'm working on something that doesn't speak to my sweet spot, and it is in your sweet spot. Why don't we talk with the boss and say, you do that, and this other thing on your plate, I really love doing that based on what you know about me. So why don't we swap those things? And so that's the really leveraging each other's strengths, is where assessments can really unlock some capability for an
Yeah.
organization. I much prefer to see them used there than in the selection process.
Yeah. And
Helpful, but not. We should not shut the door on people simply because of an assessment.
it's one data point.
It's one data point,
Yeah.
and also it can be dangerous if you're a large organization and you're using tools like that. It's a legal compliance thing we won't get into, but it could be dangerous.
Okay. Next question. How do you create a growth environment where leaders are developed, not just promoted? I love this.
Ah, well, you have to just be intentional.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think leaders need to show others how to lead.
Mm.
Leadership is not, you can go to West Point, but there's no book that taught you leadership. Maybe there was, I didn't go there, but there were leaders that gave you these foundational elements of leadership and showed you how they have led before, or led you
Yeah.
while you were in that program, and that continued through your career. So same thing for me.
Yeah.
I've seen leaders in action. I've seen leaders create results. I've seen leaders pour into me, and that is my standard of leadership now. And I can only teach it by showing and pouring into someone else.
Yeah.
Promoting to become a leader. I think hope is not a strategy,
Right.
right? So, how do you do that while, again, growing fast?
Yeah.
You need to fill the right people, right seats, and you may not have a leader, but you need to make one.
Yeah. Some leaders are just born. Quite honestly.
Yeah.
I mentioned my leadership journey. So I was lucky enough to have a lot of people pour into me from the beginning. But I'm going to brag on my wife, Amy, who hasn't had a lick of leadership training in her whole life. And she is running a wildly successful company with her partner. And she refuses to read a leadership book. And she doesn't need to, because I watch how she runs her business, and she is naturally doing all the right things.
That's
so
awesome.
Sometimes it depends on the person. But in answer to the question, there are tons of programs and books and models out there, and you just got to pick one. Leaders strong leaders are also strong readers. And so
Mhm.
if someone gets promoted without knowing how to lead, first of all, we got to sort of talk about that.
Yeah.
um, uh, but there are some basics, and it's just find a system or a program and stick with it. And just like, this is what leadership looks like at our company.
Mm.
And here's a book. This is the book that is best represents how we do it around here. So then it's a lot of coaching and mentoring type stuff where you just have someone else in a senior role pouring into you, to your point. So that's the best way. You don't have to have an official program. It's
Yeah.
just, all right, here's the basics of leadership as I see it.
That's how we do it.
It's how we do it. Yeah.
What about, so take on an earlier point we made, when a founder is running really fast and things are growing, and if he or she, and a leader, right? Any organization, doesn't have to be a founder. At some point, like we were in our journey, the gut feel, flying off the seat of the pants, could be considered leadership. I don't know. Intuition, battleship energy. How do you not arrest that in pursuit of organization and structure? Because as again, as a founder, those two things are counterintuitive to me, but they need to be done. And I think we have found the balance, but that was the struggle.
Yeah.
I don't want to break the momentum or the energy or the serendipity in favor of structure.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I would say, every car has a gas pedal and a brake pedal. And sometimes you got to go and sometimes you got to stop. And as long as you have two people who have those two inclinations and they have figured out a way to work well together, I mean, that's what in EOS, we call it the visionary integrator duo, but it's going way back to our earlier conversation about the founder who is just humble enough to realize that I'm the gas pedal and I need a brake pedal. The thing is, in a car, you'll break the car if you stomp on both of them at the same time. So can't do that. So we got to figure out when do we favor the one and when do we favor the other. And sometimes it changes, and it's going to shift and ebb and flow based on where the company is and how things are going. And it's just having the humility to recognize when the right time is for which pedal.
Great analogy. All right. Question. What is and this is Sarah Roser calling in from Rochester, New York. What's a common aha moment your clients have when they begin working with you, and how does it typically shift their leadership approach?
I should ask you about your aha moment as a client.
Well, I can point to two. Right. One was, I was auditioning.
Yeah.
And I presented an issue to which I got immediate solutions. To me, it was like a major issue. It was. But that was the value of the group, where the answer they just were obvious and they worked. And it was helpful that 9 other CEOs that had been there, told me about it. So that was my first aha while, I entered your orbit. The second one was when we had our first EOS meeting, the planning meeting, right? The first one.
The 90-minute one, or
the
first full day.
Yeah, the first full day, where the first thing you said was, pick one. Are you a visionary? Are you an integrator? Can you make the trains run on time, or are you the big ideas guy? And I was like, both. I mean, this is so intertwined that how do you expect me to separate this, Kurt? And that was when I got it. It was an aha moment, because I am naturally good at the visionary part, and I did the operator integrator part because
it had to be done.
It had to be done.
Yeah.
And
you'd been doing it for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So what sparks joy is not um, approving invoices to me.
Signing off on payroll.
Right.
Right.
What sparks joy is conversations like this that we
Yeah.
have with our team all day,
Yeah.
and building for the 6 months and beyond. That's what sparks joy. So aha
Yeah.
moments were those for me. Any other stories from clients?
I would say a recent aha moment is one of the things we talk about when companies are going through EOS is when they get the core focus of their company nailed down.
Mhm.
And in a nutshell, it's just helping companies decide why they exist and what they're really good at, and actually just putting that in writing with as few words as possible.
Yeah.
That's usually where a lot of the folks I work with kind of turn the corner, and they're like, we have never had this before. And oh my gosh, this allows us to be able to say no to all of this ash and trash work that we're doing that really does not make us happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so just distilling that out and understanding what you're not, so that you can actually be what you are, can be very liberating for folks. So that's one of them, I would say.
Yeah, and it's hard, right? When you first start a business, you'll say yes to anything they'll pay
Mm-hmm.
within reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's important to have that humility and um, awareness to know that this isn't
Yeah, filter.
filter,
You
to
need
know
that
this is
filter.
going to be a whole other
Yeah.
business, and
Yeah.
not yeah, you said yes, but need to have a plan.
Yeah. There's a crazy quote that it's escaping me right now that speaks to that, but
Yeah,
maybe it'll
it'll
come
to
to me.
you.
Um,
Let's take a question.
Yeah.
How do you create a safe space for challenge and change without sacrificing accountability and results?
Create a safe place for
Without
challenge and change without sacrificing.
accountability and results.
I'm not,
Just-
I don't know how those things are in opposition to each other.
Right. You need a safe. I mean,
Yeah.
to-
So
let me try to rephrase. I think
Yeah.
the concept
maybe
of
they can clarify for us
maybe they
in the
can.
text.
The concept of safe space
Uh-huh.
has taken on a different meaning, right? In the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 10, where safe is considered anything that you don't want to hear. But that's not the approach. Like,
Mhm.
you need to be able to say your piece.
Mhm.
And to my earlier point, that's your task. Of course, you don't say things to intentionally hurt people, but
Mhm.
people need to hear reality, truth,
Mhm.
and actual advice, and
Mhm.
that cannot be couched with too much niceness or a fear of what will the reaction be.
Yeah.
And I think if you take away that definition of safe space, what was that question? How do you challenge? Anyway, we should move on, unless you have other thoughts.
Well, I think one of the core jobs of any boss is to kind of be the monitor of psychological safety. I think
Mhm.
that's why why workplaces are considered toxic by people, is simply that it's not safe enough for them to be themselves, for them to say what's on their mind without feeling like there's going to be some retributions. It's a great little handbook called the Psychological Safety Handbook. That's kind of a really practical guide for managers to kind of just realize what their role is in creating that psychological safety. But you can't have that without there being trust, and you can't have trust without there being some vulnerability. So this is all coming back to kind of what are the what are the agreements that we're going to put in place with our fellow humans on how we're going to interact with each other, and just setting those ground rules up front that says, look, we're not here to humiliate or shame people, but we if we have some standards or some agreements that say that this is what our goals are, and this is the kind of work that we're expecting. And when you fall short, it has to be okay for us to talk about that. And for it to be taken on board in a spirit of continuous improvement, and because at that point it's not the other person judging, it's us self-judging that I'm bad, I'm less than, I'm not enough, and no one is saying anything about not being enough. We're just talking about, here's a result that missed the mark. What do we need to be doing differently to get it back up there? So
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully that answers
No,
the question.
it did, because again, goes back to values to me.
Mm,
Values will bring in the people that are good about
mhm.
taking feedback
And repel the ones who
right.
don't fit that.
Exactly.
Right?
Next one is, how do you create a shared vision that actually drives decisions, not just hangs on the wall?
Well, it's all about the leadership team needs to know how to bring it to life. EOS is one way to do that, as you know. But I'll tell you, one of the things that we learned from a Vistage speaker was a guy named David Friedman. If you have a vision and you have some values or whatever it is you want to bring to life, you just have to talk about them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And point to behaviors in the organization that speak to whatever it is you're trying to do. So it's one thing to have a vision that's on the wall, but if you don't actually share it with everyone and make sure that they're all on the same page, and it's on leadership to really paint a vivid kind of a 4K resolution picture of, here's where we're going and here's how we're going to get there. You just got to define it and talk about it until you feel like you're ready to throw up as a leader, because you're saying it so often. That's about the right cadence of when people need to hear it.
Yeah. So what we do here is every week a leader within the organization will send a video about a value.
Oh, nice.
And how to live it, and how to not live it. How do you show it?
Yeah.
How does it show up? So that's been really good, because I was about to throw up because of how often I was doing it. And then so the leadership took it on, and every week someone does a value.
Nice.
That's pretty phenomenal. Kurt, you mentioned action trash. Someone's asking for an example. What is action trash?
It's just all the debris and detritus of what's on your plate that's getting in the way of the golden nuggets of stuff that you want to be working on. And it's distractions and stuff. That's action trash. It's just
action doesn't equal results.
That's not at all what I was mentioning. No. Action trash. Maybe that's a new one I need to take on.
Yeah, you should. Copyright.
That's action trash.
Action trash. Kurt, what do you hope people remember most from today's conversation? It's an actual question came in.
Anyone can be a leader if they want to, and it's okay to not want to be one. And it doesn't, if someone is interested in growing as a leader, maybe the one nugget I would like for folks to take away with is to don't wait for someone to do that for you. Seek out books, seek out podcasts, start formulating what your own model of leadership looks like, and eventually you'll start being recognized as that, possibly, and then someone will say, that's a person that might have some potential, and then they will begin pouring into you. Maybe the other thing is find someone to talk to. Find someone outside your chain of command to be a mentor. Most mentorship programs in companies that in my experience, usually die under they usually topple over from the weight of the bureaucracy to try to maintain it and run it. Right? It's very informal. Identify a person senior to you in another organization or even in another industry that you somehow have some connection with, to just say, hey, can we connect on some sort of a quarterly cadence? You look like someone who might know a little bit about leadership, and I'm trying to craft my own practice. I'm trying to chart my own course with my journey, and you're a little bit ahead of me. LinkedIn is a great resource for that. Fellow alums from your wherever you went to school or places you used to work, or somewhere in your town, somebody that has a title in a different company, and just reach out. And could be a little daunting for some of us to reach out to a stranger, but do your homework, vet them, and just kind of say, okay, this person seems like a pretty straight up guy or girl, woman, what have you, and make a connection. Yeah.
Well, and it's not about mentorship is very the concept is very sacred to me, because that's how I learned.
Right.
Because someone poured that into me. And it doesn't happen during office hours. It doesn't, mentorship is like the speaker from last week talking about Coach Wooden. How Coach Wooden would never talk to his players about basketball
off the court,
at practice.
Right.
Mentorship isn't about learning how to do a better job putting documents together or coding. It's about how to live life, how to lead, how to grow a business, how to learn how to speak in public or not be afraid. The skill can be taught in school or within the 8 hours of the office.
The other thing I would add, I love that. That's exactly right. I have one filter to offer for folks on how to find a good one versus a great one. A good mentor is going to give you all the answers. They're going to answer all your questions. But a great mentor is going to question your answers. And they could be good ones, but they're going to make you, good mentor is going to make you think about it. And just that process alone is powerful. Yeah.
That's what forges you. Because how'd you come up with that answer?
Yeah.
And especially now, ChatGPT is giving you all the answers. Did you do the math behind it?
Yeah.
All right, Kurt. Thank you for coming on
My
the
pleasure.
show today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell people where they can find you if they want to reach out.
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on the eosworldwide.com/Kurt-Greene, or 865-407-0703 is my cell phone number.
You just give out your cell phone to the world.
To all how many people on it?
I can't divulge that. It's proprietary information. But thank you, man. Appreciate you. And,
pleasure.
Look forward to more things.
Appreciate you too.
Thank you all. Join us again next week. And we will have, if I missed any questions, I apologize, but we will go and answer them after we end this live stream. But go check us out on our website, averoadvisors.com. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel and take advantage of all of these freebies and free knowledge we're giving out. And if you have any specific projects,